Welcome. Discover the power of the collective creativity. Join us on the Creative Catalyst Hive for inspiring stories, practical tips, and expert guidance to unlock your creative potential. Ignite your creativity. Join the Hive. Hey, Lindsey, how are you?
Hi, doing good.
Awesome. Can you tell the audience a little bit about yourself here on the podcast?
Sure. My name is Lindsey Powell. I live in the Houston area with my husband and my two daughters, and I work in education. I was in the classroom for 10 years, and then I got my master's degree, and now I'm an educational diagnostician, which means I do the special education testing for identifying learning disabilities and things like that. And that's by day, and then by night, I write stories.
Nice. So tell me, how did you fall into this passion of writing stories?
Yes, it was kind of an accident, actually. I've always had a knack for writing, and I've always wouldn't say I've enjoyed writing. Once I got started with essays, I always found it easy and stuff like that. But I almost majored in journalism, and then decided to go the Spanish route, and I majored in Spanish instead. But maintained, I did fine with all of my essays in grad school and stuff. And then I got into reading avidly in 2021, like spring break 2021. I remember it because I brought a book on a vacation I went on, and I was no fun the entire time. All I did was read my book. I was like, I don't want to talk to anyone, just let me read.
Mhm.
Um, and from there it was fantasy romance. Then from there, that was my genre. And I've just kind of took a deep dive into it. And that summer I was reading a book, and I was talking to my husband at dinner about it. And I was like, I like this, the character's like this, and I really like the character, but the author's being too timid here. And I think she should do this. I think she's trying to go this way. And he was like, if you ever wanted to do that, I would totally support you. And I was like, what? And he said, if write a book, you totally should. You'd be great at it. And like that was the moment when I was like, huh. I finally like let myself imagine and like dream about like what a book, like what type of book I would want to write, what it would look like, what it would be about, who it would be about, the elements it would have in it and stuff like that. So that night I was like, okay, I'll write a book. I'll try it. Let's just give it a try. It might take a year, it might take 2 years, but it'll be fun.
Mhm.
And I started plotting and thinking about the book and the lore and the characters and stuff. And 2 weeks later, I wrote the first chapter. And then a month and a half after that, I finished the first draft. So not quite 2 years.
That's awesome. So before you fell into this at dinner with your husband and him encouraging you to write a book, did you value yourself as being creative, or what does creativity mean to you?
So that's a great question. I For me, creativity, it always feels kind of before it always felt kind of daunting to like try to be creative because there's this big expectation of if you're going to be creative, it has to be unique and it has to be different. It has to be, something that's not out there when really like for me, creativity is just creating something, whether, it's, playing guitar with the same three chords over and over again, or, and creating different songs and different melodies and things of that nature, or, some I'm not the greatest artist or drawing or anything like that, but in whatever mode you have, just creating. And I mean, in the book world, in the writing world, uh, there are they say there's only like six main story plots, and every single book is one of these types of story arcs. And from there, just like tropes galore. There's so many different types of tropes that are in books, and they're used over and over again, but in different ways. So for me, creativity is, finding something you love, specific elements that you love, that you just really, that resonate with you, that comfort you, that make you excited, and you just use them to create new things.
Agreed. So, how has being a writer impacted your life and lives around you?
Yes. Um, so yeah, I've definitely so tapped into my like creative side a lot more, just having to when you make up an entire world and people and magic systems and things like that, you just tend to tap into that area of your brain a little more. That muscle gets worked a little more. So I think And just with writing and then the whole process, I've been able to find community. So I've been able to make connections with people I probably wouldn't have like made connections with otherwise. That's been really great. Um, and then it's also me and one of our friends, Michelle. Her and I were friends, but she has a creative writing degree. And once I started writing, I was like, hey, you write, check this out. And ever since then, we've been critique partners. So it's, changed a lot of things in my life and in her life and in my family's life now that like the book has been published and stuff. But I guess in my creative endeavors and really pushing to get it published and putting myself out there, there have been like some other friends of mine who have started their own like creative interest accounts and were like, you've inspired me to like try to put myself out there and be creative. And so I was like, oh, cool.
Really neat. So tell
Yeah.
me, what are some obstacles that you had, not just coming up with content and taking the time to write, but also getting yourself published
Mhm.
and out there in the world?
So yeah, um, I have a full-time job and a full-time family, and also books take a long time to write. So like that in itself is a challenge of having the time to write because even on weekends and evenings, like my kids are old enough to where they're pretty self-sustaining, but they still need mom all the time. So trying to find those times of like those blocks of time where I can write is can be challenging because I don't want to like seclude myself completely away from my husband either. Like, gotta spend time with him. Kind of love him. Um,
It's
but
important.
then, yes. But then once the book was written, um, having to, yeah, the whole, there's a whole process that really has to be done. And which includes, you have other people read it, critique partners, and then you'll edit it. And then you'll send it ideally to an editor and they'll help you polish it off and make it ready for, querying to literary agents or to small press publishers or whichever route someone decides to go. Or even if you're going to publish it yourself, you don't need to worry about getting it ready for querying. But all of that is it takes a long time and I could have saved myself probably about a year of time if I had just bit the bullet and gotten an editor right after I finished my draft, but I didn't. I, I was like, it's good. I don't need an editor. I've had enough people read it. Oh my. um but that once it's like ready to be queried, then you have to write your query letter and do all of the research for either the agents or the publishers. You have to make sure they're open. You have to follow their querying guidelines, and it's very cumbersome and it's a very saturated market, right? That like the book world is. There is a lot of supply and not necessarily, well, there's enough demand, but there's not enough like people to man the ship. So there's all of these people sending in their stories, and some of them are they're probably all a lot, not all of them, but a bunch of them, a good chunk of them are probably really great stories, but there's just no way they can all be seen or all be given the time that they deserve. So, it's you're up against a lot going in there. I queried, starting from when my book shouldn't have been queried, when I really should have like continued editing it and like made some like major rewrites and stuff like that, but I started querying it almost right away. And from that first starting to query it in like December 2021 until summer 2023, when I got my three full requests, I had over 100 rejections from literary agents and small press publishers combined. Now that being said, again, I told you I could have saved myself a lot of grief, and I queried a story that wasn't ready. It wasn't ready to be queried, and I just got really excited and I shot my shot, and it didn't go very well, but it's a huge market and it's a very specific market. So it's kind of, it's trying to throw a dart and hit the bullseye every time. It's really difficult.
Mhm. So, what are some tips and tricks that you would tell someone? Two-part question. One is someone who wants to just write and get their thoughts out, whether they publish it or not. And two, someone who's ready to publish. Like, what are your tips, tricks, with tidbits of wisdom?
So if somebody is just wanting to get into writing, they're, I've got these, maybe I've got these ideas, or, I just really maybe they want to like start blogging and writing about the world around them or whatever. I encourage them to research the medium that they're interested in and then find community, either find a writers group. um, they can research most like big cities. I know in Houston, there's like tons of like writing organizations. There's a Houston Writing Center. Like there's lots of resources out there to help people who want to write, to find that community, to find the people um, that they can come to like help with their writing, to, become better writers and find that encouragement and that accountability to keep with it. That's made the biggest difference for me, is being able to find, I have my critique partner here, but I also have a lot of author friends that I've connected with through, Instagram and TikTok, that I'm on in community with on like Discords and stuff like that. And we can, we chat in there and we bounce ideas off each other and we critique and we connect um, and hash out ideas and things like that. So really having a space with other creators to just be creative together and help each other and bounce off each other and make each other better is going to help so much. Because if you try to do anything alone, it you start to feel like what am I even doing? Like, I don't have creation, and creating something in and of itself is meant to be shared. Like nobody is going to be like, I'm going to paint this pretty picture and then put it in a closet. Like you want to share things that you create with people, because that's just the nature of it. Like like with the movie industry as well, like that's creating something and it's meant to be shared. So if you don't have like that outlet to start, like to work on your craft with somebody else, it's going to feel kind of pointless.
Mm-hmm.
There's also too, if they're not necessarily looking to get published but they just want to write, there's lots of writing contests they can enter too. And those are, from short stories to microfiction. Different lengths of writing is basically what it is. And there's all sorts of like story submission things. So there's lots of things out there for people who are looking to write and to be active in the writing community. Now, somebody who has written a book, you say, Lindsey, I've written my book and I want to get it published. I think I've got a great idea. That is so exciting. Find an editor, save up some money, because it's not going to be cheap. And that was our biggest thing. I think that's the biggest thing that the biggest wall people come up to, whenever you're a debut author and you don't have any background, you don't have any clout, you don't have any resources, so you have to pay for everything yourself. Editors are not cheap. They're not. But it really, and even if you do have a great story, like it does need an editor. I promise it does. Even, yeah, I mean, Stephen King even has an editor. So that would be the first step, is finding an editor who edits your genre, who has my cat is trying to join. find an editor who edits your genre, who has that experience, who you feel confident in, will help make your writing better. And then from there, a lot of editors also have querying services. He's gonna knock my camera down. I'm so sorry.
You're fine. It's okay. Mine, every time I get on the computer, I like to also walk between the camera and the
Of
computer.
course.
Okay.
Of course. So yes, a lot of editors also have querying packages that they'll help you with as well. I know I applied for a first 10 pages query critique, or not query critique, first 10 pages critique from an editing agency in the Houston area. And they did a panel at Comic Palooza last year. And I applied early enough and I got picked to be one of the ones. And they gave me like a panel of 5 editors, all read the first 10 pages of my novel and just gave me feedback. And it was like the most like valuable. After that, I got 3 full requests. Like it was just like super valuable. That was once like that happened and I started seeing all the success that was coming from it. I was like, man, like could have saved myself so much time if I had just done what everyone says to do. So yes, querying, there's also lots of resources out there. Like you can do your research on your own, figuring out the query formula. Query is going to look different genre to genre, story to story. If it's a first book or a sequel, it's going to look different. did a lot of research on querying and like what a query should look like.
Mhm.
And, there is kind of a formula, but even then, there's so much tweaking. My queries probably changed like 10 times since the first time I wrote it. And so just doing your research, getting an editor, and just doing putting as much like effort at the beginning,
Mhm.
so that it goes smoothly then, because once you start the researching, your querying and your editing and polishing off your manuscript is one thing, and then you have to put all of the actual writing stuff aside, which is the most aggravating part for writers. And then you have to like do the research on like writing the query and writing your synopsis and all sorts of things that no writer ever wants to do because it's so hard. And then researching those literary agents and who's accepting what, are they open, what like type of what word counts are they looking like. There's so many different specifications. I made spreadsheets because there was just so much information. So yes,
So can you tell
in
our listeners if
summary,
they don't know what a query is? Like, what exactly is it? What all
yes.
does it entail?
So a query letter is, so I when I wrote my book, a query letter is basically a hook for a literary agent. It has to, ideally it's a little snippet of what your book is about, should be no more than 300 words, because literary agents get like tons and tons of emails,
Mhm.
like hundreds a day, 50 hundreds a day. And they have to, it's so fast paced and there's so many, they just have to be hooked and they have to be excited right away. But a query letter is where you'll introduce yourself, introduce your book, you'll give like your word count and your genre, a couple of comparable titles so that they know kind of like what they're getting into. And then you give a short little snippet about your book. You'll introduce your main character. You'll introduce probably like the rising action, like where the story starts, like what's the problem that they have to solve. And then you introduce the stakes. You don't give away the ending or anything like that, but you tell what the story is about without giving anything away, because you only have like 300 words. And you'll also include like a little bit about yourself as far as like what it pertains to your writing and stuff. And it's only 300 words and it takes forever to write because it's just, it's very tricky. And it was awful. But yeah, it's a really short letter. It's no, like the meat of it's not going to be any more than 300 words. But if you think about like a novel, a fantasy novel that you have to like condense down into 300 words and make it like um, interesting enough for them to want to like read more. It's very tricky, and it's the bane of very many authors' existence, because it's just very hard to, the entire story, everything feels important. Like I
Uh-huh.
wrote it that way. Everything feels important, and I think everything needs to be mentioned. So I ended up having to like start big and then like whittle it down and things
Mhm.
like that. So
So it reminds me of like a proposal you used to write when you wanted to research something or, something, but you have
yes.
to narrow it down and summarize, without even having research yet.
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah.
Yeah, you'll do your query and then, well, and queries can change too,
Mhm.
but I you'll only be querying agents who are in your genre. So there, yes, I feel like I'm talking in circles now.
No, you're good. You're good. So let me ask you this question. Are there any specific techniques that you would suggest to do? You mentioned already getting into a community of some sort, whether it's in person, locally, or even online. You kind of alluded to with
Mhm.
Discord and Instagram and
Yeah.
TikTok. Is there any other tips and tricks, or you think that's the most valuable?
Um, for what? Tips and tricks for
Getting people into writing and or published if they're already a
and
writer.
or published. Um, the internet is really a treasure trove. Google was my friend for a long time. Me and Professor Google learned a lot together. But really, if you're wanting to get into writing, then you go where those communities are on social media. Instagram, Writergram is huge. It's on, there's Writer Talk on TikTok as well. And I found being able to connect with people is easier on Instagram. It's just I think the platform lends itself more to creating community and making meaningful connections more so than TikTok does.
Mhm.
Um, TikTok is a lot more for those quick connections when you're trying to grow your audience and things like that. But Instagram, I've found I've made a lot more of my connections with author friends and even readers and other reader friends through just talking about books and talking about writing. And so all of these people are starting a writing community, and they just like give you the Discord code and you can just hop in.
Mhm.
I've connected with some other indie authors as well, and they've invited me into like Discord servers and stuff like that. I say Discord a lot. That's where I am. That's where a lot of my people are.
Mhm.
But there's websites and other all sorts of other stuff too. I know a friend of mine, Brittany, also has she has a writing group, and they meet on Zoom like once a week because they're all over the country,
Mhm.
and they get together and have like their writing sprints at the same time every week. So it's really just getting out there and finding your people and, just writing. There's lots of too, if you're like, I like writing, but for me, I get in my head of if I have too many options, I don't know where to start. And if you're like, well, you could start with anything, like that's the problem. That's too much.
Mhm.
Um, Pinterest has been super awesome. There's tons of writing resources on Pinterest as far as writing prompts. There's lots of writers on there who've posted resources for like if you're looking to plot your novel, there's lots of novel outlining resources on there. Lots of if you're wanting to write this type of story or this type of story, if you're wanting to have this type of scene or this type of character, like there's like character building charts and plot outlines galore. And there's just so many. I have a writing board on Pinterest, and it's so saturated. I will never have enough time to go through everything. But I've found myself whenever in the last writing contest that I entered. It was not nanofiction, it was microfiction. And I had never written so few words before. I think it was like a 500 word limit. And you have to tell a story. And we were given 3 prompts, and all of it had to be included in your 500 words. And I had never done that before. So I went on Pinterest and just like, searched microfiction prompts and some articles on what microfiction looks like, how to write microfiction, where to start, how to structure it. And then from there, I was able to find some prompts and I was able to practice. And so I have like a couple of microfiction stories like on my computer that aren't ever going to see probably the light of day. Maybe I'll use them as like a base for something one day.
Mhm.
But Pinterest definitely has a lot of good stuff, a lot of good stuff.
So once you finally wrote your first book and you published it, how have you marketed the book for people to read?
I've been trying so hard. It is very challenging because I my book is published. I'm not self-published. I'm published with an independent press. They're a smaller press, so it was still traditional publishing, but on a much, much smaller scale. So they did all of the book part for me. The cover design, book formatting, editing, things of that nature. They handled all like the ISBN stuff and the putting it in the places where the people can buy it and all of that stuff. But as far as like help with marketing, their reach is rather small because they are such a small operation. They don't have the clout that Penguin Random House has.
Mhm.
So with that, it's been really challenging. I've been on Bookstagram and Book Talk since, December 2021 when I was like, let's get this published. And I've been trying to grow community and make community. And it's just a slow process. And I just recently finally have a book to like be like, hey, look, go
Mhm.
read this. From since then, it's been difficult to try to grow a readership when you don't have anything for them to read.
Mhm.
So um, I've been on TikTok and Instagram. I got in contact with a couple of independent bookstores in the Houston area, and I've done 2 in-person signings, and those were a lot of fun. A friend of mine, Michelle, came and she helped to facilitate those with me, and I got to sign books and I got to meet a few new readers, so that was really exciting. Um, and then, yeah, a majority of the stuff that I've been doing has been social media and internet based, just because I would like to go to all the conventions, but you have to pay for tables to go there, and then you have to travel, and you have to bring your own stock, and it's all expensive. So, it's I'm I'm doing a lot of reaching out to, it's my cat again.
You're fine.
I've reached out to several book influencers on Instagram and TikTok, and I sent promotional boxes with a copy of my book and some other fun little goodies in there. And then I asked them if they would be interested in receiving a promo box, and they said yes, and I sent it. And the idea is that they would do an unboxing, show people my book, and then they'll read the book and ideally review it, post about it, and things like that, which will hopefully help with word of mouth. I also did ARC reading, which ARC stands for Advanced Reader Copy. And for people who are in like the reading community, they know all about it. But like when I told my mom about like I was going to get ARC readers, she was like, what the heck is that? And it's really people who want to read your book before it's published in order to they'll get it for free, with the understanding that they post their honest review about it once they finish. So they weren't able to on Amazon until it was published, but my book was up on Goodreads a little bit before, so they could post reviews there. They could also post reviews like on their own social media accounts or on their blogs or whatever. So I did ARC. I got an ARC team, and I sent out promo boxes, and I am grinding on social media with posting and trying to get word out. And it's hard. It's like a full-time job, which is why they have people who are personal assistants and marketing experts. That's why those are jobs because it is a full-time job, which if I didn't have my own full-time job and I could write full-time, I feel like I could probably do a little bit better, and just have more time to dedicate to it than I do. And I've just come to, give myself grace. Like I can only do what I can do, and I'm not going to stress about, my family is not going to live or die on whether this book, gets into the top 100 on Amazon or anything like that. So that was my husband has to remind me all the time. He's like, why did we write this book? Because it was fun. Like, that's why we're doing it. That's why we're doing it. So
Very
it's
true.
fun and we want to share it with people.
So what have you found rewarding about publishing your first book so far, besides just, publishing a book?
Right. Besides the accomplishment itself,
Yes.
it's, it, I think it's caused me to like surprise myself with how much I actually like am able to do and how much I was able to do. I hope too that it sets an example to my girls. My youngest is only 5, so she doesn't quite get it, but my oldest is 8, and so she understands like books get published, and books are in the library, and she's seen my book, like she saw my book in the house. But I think it really hit her that like, oh, like my mom's an author. Whenever we went to the library and she saw my book in the library and I showed it to her and she was like, that's your book. So letting her and my youngest, because I'm not going to stop writing, so she'll get there eventually, having them see that mom did hard things and mom worked really hard and she was able to do big things and it was really hard, but she kept going, and being able to like be that example of what hard work looks like, and putting work out there. And also like you are like because you exist, like the story you have within you is worth telling and sharing. And like that's what like I would love for both of them to realize through all of this, is that they have value, and whatever they want to share they can as well, because mommy saw that what she had has value for no other reason than because she existed and she had an idea. So like I feel like that's really cool as well. It's also been cool to like connect with readers. I actually had a new review pop up on TikTok today of somebody who recently bought and read my book. And it's just really cool to see how people connect with the story, what they like about it, and maybe like what they don't like about it, because even negative reviews sell books, if you didn't know that. And so just really watching people, go on this adventure with your characters that you've been on a million times, is just really cool to see.
So fun. So fun. So I guess I'm going to leave it this parting question thought, and that is, have you ever thought about your book becoming a movie or maybe being placed on the ban list or anything like that? And what would you do for either one of those?
Well, it's every author's dream to have like some producer come to them and say, "Hey, we want to, buy the rights to adapt this into a TV show or into a movie." It's every author's dream. So of course, like, I've anytime I come across like an actor or actress who I think would be like a good Ophelia, who's my main character, I like take a screenshot and I send it to my friends and I'm like, give her red hair and she's Ophelia. I have and tons of stuff like that. So um that would be super fantastic. It's a long way off because I am a teeny tiny nobody and nobody really knows who I am or what my book is. And there's lots of like pretty much all the TV shows that are coming out now are like book adaptations. It's nuts. So maybe. But as far as being put on the ban list, I mean, where is it getting banned from? Because like last I checked, I mean, if it's going to be banned from a school, yeah, my book doesn't belong in a school. Like teenagers don't need to be reading my books. I write for adults. Like, cool, that's fine. But as far as, if we're talking about banning it that way, then yeah, fine. I won't be bothered by it. I mean, they'll still be talking about it. Like they'll be talking about it either way, right? So somebody will hear about it and they'll be interested.
Right.
So getting put on a ban list doesn't really scare me too much.
Fancy. Well, if people wanted to find you, you've stated already you're on TikTok and Instagram and Discord and several places.
Yes.
But where would you like us to look first?
Um, TikTok and Instagram is definitely where I'm most active. I'm within communities on Discord. I have not started a community on Discord because I hardly have time to like keep up with my own social media, nonetheless start a group of people who want to just like chat about books. But I am on TikTok and Instagram. My handle is at Lindsey Likes to Write, on both of them, so easy to find. And then my website's linked on there. That's also, I have got links on in my profile on both of them for where to buy my books or book. It will be books, but to where to buy my book, and where they can find it. And they can sign up for my newsletter if they want, all the cool information first. So it's all there on my socials.
All right. And I've already heard through this conversation, you're going to write a second one, a sequel to the first one.
Yes, it's a trilogy. So the first one ends on a cliffhanger that a lot of people have shaken their fist at me about. So,
well, thank you so much for your time. And thank you so much
yes.
for giving us some tips and tricks. And I look forward to having you again some other time.
Yes,
Get your next
book. Thank you.
Take care.
You too. Bye.
Bye. Join the Hive where ideas thrive, a buzzing hub of creativity alive. The Creative Catalyst Hive, your guiding light. Ignite your spark, take flight. Thanks for listening with your host, creativity coach, Misty Hummel.